Welcome to the On the Rise podcast, where we talk about time freedom, passive investing through real estate, finance, and mindset. Let's dive in. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I am not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer.
Welcome to the On the Rise podcast. This is the Faith Driven Leader series. My name is Nick Stromwall, your host. And in this new series, we're exploring how people integrate their faith into their work. So we're bringing on friends, guests, partners connected to our team to really understand when you hit that trial, when you hit that snag, how do you bring in your faith to your work? Is faith something that's just on Sundays or maybe Wednesday nights, but how do you incorporate it in? So we've got an awesome guest today and want to just kind of bring him on and have him introduce himself. His name is Trey Taylor. We met through a random meeting several weeks ago and just really hit it off. And I just asked him if he'd be interested to share more about his life and his story on this podcast. So welcome, Trey, to the podcast.
Nick, thanks for having me, man. And when you asked me to be on the podcast, I hesitated a little bit because, I don't like to be the one that's out there sort of throwing elbows and saying, "Hey, watch me, listen to me," when it comes to faith. And it's not because I hold my faith cheaply; it's because I hold it dear, and I take it very seriously that your opinions might affect somebody else, and I want to make sure that anytime that is in play, that the author of the faith is behind it. And so I'm glad to join you. I'm interested to see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for jumping on. Maybe just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit, could you just kind of give a little brief background of who you are, how you're connected to real estate, and just a little bit about some of the companies that you've managed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I run a family office that we formed in 2019. We did that, by putting in a lot of the businesses that we owned and the real estate that we owned and that sort of thing all into one big pool. So we're managing wealth created by three generations of our family for the benefit of the next three generations is our charter. And so a huge portion of that, of course, is real estate investing. It's really hard to put your foot wrong if you invest in real estate and the future of America. And so that's been where our most consistent and most trustworthy returns have come over the years.
That's amazing. Something that stood out to me, Trey, was just the intentionality of some of the questions you were asking me last time we connected, and you shared a story about one of your children. I think it was maybe your oldest, of how you guys actually did a real estate deal together. Could you just
Yeah.
unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so we always grew up generationally investing. My grandfather was sort of the founder of the family, if you will, and he was always so he had a profitable business. He would dump the profits of that business into real estate, alternative investments, but it was always really real estate for him. And when he died at 93, he had never paid capital gains tax because he couldn't believe that the tax code gives us 1031 in the first place, and then he couldn't believe that people didn't use it. And so he always used 1031. But for example, if he was flipping a house, or if he was cleaning up a shopping center, if he was doing anything real estate related, he would invite us, sort of directively so, to come and help at whatever age we were. And we did a task that was age appropriate. So I remember being about 8 years old, picking up pine cones from around a pool in a multifamily development that he had purchased out of foreclosure when bank rates were super high, and in the 80s when that was really difficult to do. And he gave me a little credit, 1% or probably less than that in that project. And I always felt in my heart that I earned that money. I did the work to have a piece of that. When he flipped that property and he put it into something else, I always had a little bit. I didn't grow up with a trust fund, but we grew up with that idea. Well, trying to get your kids interested in stuff is tricky, especially when you're competing with screens the way that we do as parents today. But one time, my son and his grandfather, my wife's father, we had gone to a football game and we were coming home, and he was just talking to the two of us and said, I really wish I could go on safari, but I know we can't afford that. It was interesting to me because very intentionally, we don't use the words that we can't afford. We believe that faith and work deliver, what it is that we want to have. And so I challenged him to pull his iPad out and figure out what does it cost. And he looked up the most expensive thing he could possibly find, and it was eye-wateringly expensive. Okay, we'll be just be true about that. And so I told him, okay, here's how you would go about doing that. We would buy a house, we would invest X amount of dollars in it, we would flip it for the new adjusted price, we would take the profits from that, and most of the time we would roll those profits in. But this is the way that we would go on safari. And so he was very interested in that, and he brought it up 3 or 4 more times after that. And so eventually we found a house to flip. We did it. We made a lot of money on that flip. It was really a great flip. And the day before closing, a friend of mine who is with the Madison Square Garden Alliance called and said, "Didn't you say your son wanted to go on safari?" And I said, "Yeah, he does." He says, "Well, I'm putting something in the silent auction tomorrow that you can look at online, and you should go bid on it." And we did. We got it. It was an unbelievable place. When we were there, the place is divided into two sort of parts of it. Johnny Depp had taken all of the cabins or the tents in the other side, and some other guests were on this side with us. The head of the Ritz, the owners of Red Stripe Beer Company. I mean, just really movers and shakers were on the side with us. And we were perched over the rim of the Masai Mara, where it's this massive wildlife preserve and all of that. So anyway, we were able to make that happen out of the proceeds of the flip, and we had money left over. And my son said, "Hey, Dad, can we afford to fly first class?" So he caught on really quickly, and we did have enough money that we were able to do that. It was a trip of an absolute lifetime. He got adopted into the tribe and all of that sort of thing. He was 14 when we did that trip. And I'm telling you, I had been invited to Africa many times before that, and I had always said, "Nah, I'm more of a Europe guy or something like that." And they say, "Well, Africa gets in your heart," and it does. So I don't know if I told you this part, but when we were there, we went and toured one of the villages, and it was full of little girls. The boys were off at play or school. The men were there and the women were there working, but the children were all little girls. And we asked about that. And they said, well, the fathers will not come out of pocket for school fees for girls. So they have to do the work on their own. They don't really love to do it for the boys, but they understand that there's benefit from that. This infuriated my son. And then there was another reason that the girls couldn't go to school at certain times of the month when, lots of wild animals are around, and that it poses a danger that we don't face here in this country. My son came home and he began to raise money for school fees and for fees for some of the materials that those girls could use and that sort of thing. And he was very conscious that they also were not getting something that we think is important, which is faith based education. And we have a local charity here that provides in your native language um, biblical training. And so we were able to make a large gift to that organization based on his work. And so those girls and boys are receiving materials in their native language today that hopefully will lead them to make a life changing, eternal life changing decision. All of that because my grandfather thought at one point that it would be good for us to go and do the things that we should do to support the investments of the family. So it's a beautiful sort of come full circle there.
Yeah, that full circle is really sweet, just to have a patriarch of the family give vision to you, and for you to give vision for your son, to not think small but to think, hey, this is actually possible. If you want to do it, go find out what it costs. Okay,
Yeah.
this is what it costs. Now let's make a plan. You get to use your training, your knowledge that you've gotten from not only doing real estate deals but leading companies. That's truly amazing. It reminds me of one of my heroes I got to meet 2 weeks ago, John Tyson. He wrote the book The Intentional Father. He was at the Kingdom Advisors Conference and he gave one of the talks. And vision is so important. He was native to Australia, went to a conference, went out in the field, prayed, felt like God was calling him to America. So he did what a 19-year-old could do, went to the store, bought a picture of America, happened to be a picture of New York, put it up on his mantle, and every day he'd come home from work and he'd start praying, Lord, get me there. And after about 2 years, he got a scholarship to come study. Fast forward several years, married, kids. Him and his friends bought a building downtown New York for $13 million, became a ministry center. They lived there. One day he had a moment of deja vu coming out on 46th Avenue, seeing the very picture he had been
Oh,
praying
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
was right there. Like, vision is so important. So, you're a leader, you're giving vision to multiple companies, to your kids. How do you give vision from a faith-based lens? What does that look like?
We take it seriously but lightly as well. Because I think we've all probably been exposed to someone who decided no matter what that day you were going to adopt their view of some issue, faith-based or not. And, I don't want to have my agency removed when I am coming to weighty and important matters. And I don't want to do that for other people. I always have felt like a man convinced his will is of the same opinion still, that sort of old rubric. And so, how do you bring vision? Um, the way that we think about it and talk about it is vision literally means what you see. And the more I can talk with you and use correct language and every other tool at my disposal to show you what the vision looks like in your own mind, the more energy that I release about achieving that vision. What we all don't like is a leader that stands far off, doesn't know us, stands up and says, "Here's where we're going," in very general and sort of bland terms. That's not what we want. I want somebody up there painting a vision that says, "This is what it looks like when we come home. This is what it looks like when we serve our clients in the best possible way, or when we make the financial return, or whatever that happens to be." And so we spend, my team might tell you a little too much time, but we spend a lot of time talking about what does the end state look like? What does success look like? And really go through that. In my primary operating business, we have just come off of our goal setting process in January, where everyone goes through about a 47-page goal setting guide, and they intentionally set three personal goals, three business goals, unlimited amount of family goals, and then, of course, they have sales and production or marketing goals or whatever their individual job is. What does that mean? What I'm getting them to do is to form the vision and then describe it in terms of achievable goals so that when those goals are achieved, the vision is also achieved and they wake up effectively in a life that they designed and built intentionally. And so that's been the greatest sort of hack that we've ever seen on how do you do that.
That's amazing. Are you using a like an EOS type of tool, or what type of tool set are you using for that?
I'm using something that I picked up in the sixth grade from one of the guru speakers. This is the weird kid that I was. I had a set of tapes that my dad's business partner had given me. They were Brian Tracy tapes. The program was called The Psychology of Achievement. Still the best program I've ever been through. And my mom was kind enough to let me listen to those tapes on the way to school every morning. We had a long commute to school. And for years, I mean, like 6 years while I was in high school, I listened to the psychology of achievement every day. And it's how do you set a goal and how do you break it down to where it's achievable? How do you have a vision? What do you want, your world to look like after you have done the things to build it? And that's the process that we use today with a lot of nuance and a lot of things that we've learned over the years that go into it as well. But yeah, that's where that process comes from. And this year we purchased software for the first time so that it does a lot of the automatic tracking for us.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to check that out. I don't think I've ever heard that one. I love the productivity books and David Allen and all the greats out there.
Same. Yeah,
Um,
I love David Allen.
yeah.
He's one of my heroes that I've never met,
Okay.
and I just sort of need to tell the universe that that I want to meet David Allen because I mean, he's affected my life. I was running one company before I ran across Getting Things Done and his better book, Making It All Work.
Mm,
Much, much, much better book.
mm.
And I went from one company to eight companies, and had more time.
It's amazing. It's amazing
Yeah.
what happens. The power of finding good quality people, delegation, setting a vision, and keeping people accountable. So that's great.
I'm Zach Captainstall, CEO and co-founder of Rise 48 Equity. Our goal is to help you protect and grow your wealth by investing in large multifamily apartment buildings. We do all the work as far as sourcing these large apartment buildings from the brokers, doing all of the on-site management with our vertically integrated property management company, doing all the renovations with our vertically integrated construction company. We completely rebrand the exteriors. We will renovate the interiors to our full platinum level scope, which increases the value of the asset to get that profit margin for the investor. If you'd like to learn about how you can partner with us on these exciting opportunities, and go to our website and set up a call with our team.
One of the best ways I think you can really learn how to integrate your faith is when we come across trials. Could you just unpack a time or a season where you've had a trial in one of your businesses or in your personal life where you really had to exercise your faith? And what did that look like for you as a leader?
I can give you a good contrast here. I came to faith late. I was always headstrong. I was educated in parochial school, but it was a denomination that believed that the way that you teach kids was different than the way that this kid could take it in. And and I did not benefit from that education, being headstrong as I was. So I didn't come to Christ. If you had asked me, I would have told you I was a Christian, but I had never, surrendered. I had never done any of that work at all, and did not really grow up in regular church attendance. And so, I went to college and got into things that probably you shouldn't get into, and you make all of the false steps off the road. And then when my dad very unexpectedly passed away in 2005, and I had an entire career built away from the business that we run today. I'm an attorney by training, a venture capitalist by training, had been hired at some of the largest companies in the world in the first generation of the internet to come and do corporate development and business development work, buying and selling companies, setting up investment strategies for their venture capital arms and those kinds of things. And my dad passed away very unexpectedly, and I had to come home just to sort of right the ship for a little while. And I was an unsaved person. And the torture of it, of not knowing, would I see my dad again, the pain of dealing with grief in a way that had no bound. There was no perfection of my grief. Um, the tears, the razors that I was swallowing every day to get through the day, those kinds of things. And then, I don't mind sharing with you the bad habits that will come to you in that time to make it through. It was a really dark time for me. Um, so that's the contrast of a man without faith facing something in the business. Now, my dad was the end all be all for our business. We didn't have a succession plan. It was basically him and 20 of his absolute best friends on earth really having a good time. And without the glue of him being here, and then this guy coming in who nobody knew, it was a really tough time in the business. We were successful at keeping his goals met for that first year, and that was good. At the same time, I met my wife, who I'd known before, but she came into my life more prominently. We decided to get married, and she was very desirous of doing so. But one day on a Sunday afternoon, she called and we sat down together, and she said, "I want to marry you, but you're not a believer. And I will marry you if you're not a believer, but you have to promise me that you will take me to church." And I said, "Well, I am a believer, and I can go to church. That's not a big deal. And you're a catch, so let's do it." And so we did. And so in that church, my conversion experience, I walked in one Sunday and the pastor was preaching out of the book of Amos. And I will hazard a guess that you have never heard a sermon out of the book of Amos. The book of Amos is called the book of lawyers. And I really think that God had moved everything he could in front of me that I couldn't see, and finally moved it all out. And the pastor said very clearly, the famous passage from Amos is, "Let justice be done, though the heavens fall." And to a lawyer, I understood exactly what that meant. And I was waiting on something proactive for me to go and bend my knee to the Savior. And I understood at that point that that wasn't going to happen. I also don't mind sharing with you that I had a ton of shame about the bad things that I had done. And it seemed to me that only a psychotic would ask someone else to pay for the wages of his sin. And I needed to be told that that was the promise being offered. And I didn't understand it linearly until that day. So I went and was baptized 2 Saturdays or 2 Sundays later. So that was great. And we had a wonderful life. And then I lost my brother, my baby brother, in 2019 to a very unexpected thing, a pulmonary embolism that hit him in the middle of the night. So literally, he woke up, took a step, and died. And the ability to handle that with faith as my ally, my hands being held, um, the contrast of that was very significant to me to pay attention to. And then I lost my mom 4 years later, and in holding my mom's hand on her last day, she and I shared that faith together. And the level of grief and sorrow that I went through with my father compared to what I went through with my brother, compared to what I went through with my mother, the more I fell backwards into the arms of Jesus, the less debilitating that grief was. I don't mean to say that I don't feel sad and felt grief for their loss. I did. But I had a very good friend who told me the immortal parts of you are still in relationship with the immortal parts of them. That is the perfection of our grief through Jesus. And I thought, gosh, that's the most helpful thing I think anybody ever told me. And that is why when I decide to witness and put it out there to people, I want them to know that there's a very practical reason as a businessman that faith is something that you should open up to and consider as a practical matter. It's not only a sort of an esoteric or a an abstract concept, that there are actual concrete reasons that we want to be in the faith in this life.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. Those are some very significant trials to lose parents, loved ones, and I think the hope that's stirred in the midst of that is, we might get what, 40, 60, 80, 100 years on this life, and this life is a vapor, a mist, but eternity is forever. And just like you're talking about, that eternal connection, for anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord, they will be saved. And for many people, we can't understand the simplicity and also the weight that, you're lawyer by trained. And I always imagine, coming to the end. And if someone had to judge my life based on Nick Stromwell, it'd be guilty, right? There'd be no way my
It's a
good.
fast pass case right there for Trey Taylor. I mean, that's not a deliberation at all. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But like the free gift of Jesus is the most amazing news in the world. And if you're listening and you've never maybe heard of this free gift, my encouragement would be go check out the Gospel of John or the book of Ephesians. Ephesians 2 talks about us being dead in our sins, but God being rich in mercy and giving us this free gift. And the free gift is when you come to that courtroom, if you're judged based on your life, it's going to be a guilty verdict, but Jesus steps in and he accepts your penalty, your shame, your payment, and he's even willing to give himself his own life to pay for it. And that's beautiful news. And that changes everything: how you run your life, the operating system of your life, how you lead companies, how you lead your family. What changed after that moment with how you led?
Well, I don't think I was very good at it right up front. I went home and in my church, they dunk you and wish you well. And then I just didn't get much discipleship training. It wasn't a thing back then. This was 2006 or 7, around that time. It just wasn't a thing. And so a friend of mine handed me The Purpose Driven Life, and I used it as hard as I could. And I was very mentored by someone, and I hesitate to bring up his name because of the way things ended for him. But Ravi Zacharias was somebody that I listened to on the radio for 20 years, and I went to Ravi's conferences and even did his retreats in Wheeling, Illinois. Became friends with members of the ministry. We began to support the ministry. We went to his ministry retreats as well, and began to deepen in the faith. And as I deepened, the less I tried, the more other people said, "I notice a change in you. You are less abrasive, or you're less harsh, if you will, in this way or this way," and that sort of thing. And that's the indwelling of the Spirit, that you're letting out little by little. And I think that that's what people are drawn to when they see it in you. I was always, and Nick, maybe you can identify with this. I was afraid that I couldn't do business as hard as I wanted to do business if I was a Jesus freak. I mean, I'm just butchering the terms there, right? But if was I allowed to turn a profit, for example, if I'm supposed to be Jesus's representative, and those kinds of things, and I had to work through all of those things. And I bring that up just to say I was of the mindset that until I figured those things out, I couldn't become a Christian. And the answer is you cannot figure those things out until you are a Christian, because the experiential nature of having Jesus' Spirit inside of me allows me to see in the moment as he would see. And there are times when I look and I see a prophet and I say, "This is unconscionable. We shouldn't make this much money in this situation," and we will change that. There are other times when I don't feel that way, and we make the profit relative to the value that we have created, and I don't have those same problems. But I had to work through those, and I had to work through those with a lot of good Christian mentors in the business space. Prime of which is my father-in-law, who happens to work in our business. He's a man of great faith.
Hmm. Man, I think that tension a lot of people share, and some people don't really have good examples of leaders in their life where they're really excelling in their work and they're excelling in their family, and their wife and kids look forward to spending time with them, and they know their neighbors' names, and maybe they have them over. I think sometimes there's a picture of, if I become successful, if I acquire resources or get wealthy, that automatically means evil, bad, negative thoughts, versus having a leader who's more of like a Boaz type of leader, who is excelling, who is creating multiple successful businesses, but who's using those and views those businesses as stewardship to advance kingdom purposes, whatever that might mean. So how do you approach that in your own life or in the businesses you run? Stewardship, how to steward the resources God's given you. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, we have as you won't be surprised, we have an intentional framework for that. So we have a family foundation, and the motto of that foundation is not by us, but through us are these things done. We have been blessed with material wealth. We have been blessed with intelligence as well, and a gift for the capital side of the world. And when I was struggling at my deepest, I had several of my mentors say, Trey, God would not have created you in this way, in this time, when those tools work so beautifully for you not to use them. Your job is not to go into the desert or into the wilderness. Your job is to do exactly what you're doing. And so we are blessed to be a blessing, people sometimes say, but we have that family foundation. And just recently, we were able to endow a medical clinic on the site of the local one of the local technical colleges in Georgia, which is a big deal. It's the first time it's ever been done in our state, and we did that. And we would not have been able to do that if we didn't have a giving philosophy. In the same year, we also gifted a lot of capital, a lot for us, to the program that I told you about, which is called the Mailbox Club. You can go on there and you can sign up kids all over the world. If you can put an address where that kid can receive mail, that kid will receive mail, and they'll receive it in their language, and they can work through the very elementary um, parts of the faith. So we gave a large grant there, and my son is now talking about wanting to build a school in Kenya, and I think that that's 800,000 to $1 million, and I think that's none of my business. I think the Lord will provide if He wants a school in that place. But I have to do the right things. I have to build the foundations, and I have to have the infrastructure that makes it possible when the capital comes. And so that's my tasking today. And so we're working with someone local there. And and my son is just starting to talk about the fact that he's going to build a school in Kenya one day. And I'm going to tell you, Nick, he's going to build a school in Kenya one day. I don't have a doubt about that. So, I don't know that I'm answering the question as directly as possible, but we have an intentional giving philosophy. We take a percentage of our profits. We tithe first, um, and then we put the remainder into our charitable efforts. And I always feel like um, anybody who asks is Jesus in disguise, and so they're going to go away with something. I give money to homeless people now, and I used to not do that at all. As a matter of fact, I give every dollar in my pocket to a homeless person that asks for money. And it's not my business what they do with it, because I do it in collaboration, if you will, in alignment with my belief that Jesus can use that money far more effectively than I can.
I just took my son winter camping in Minnesota. It was a whopping 8 degrees
It
with
sounds
a
miserable.
with a negative 15 wind chill, and from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. I couldn't sleep because I was cold. The Nalgene water bottle that was full of hot water wore off, and just couldn't stop thinking about, how do homeless people do this in Minnesota? How do they make it? And that's a good challenge to think through, what does being generous mean. And I think, like, God directs, right? We don't have to have a master plan, because the Spirit gives us wisdom. So I can imagine, you're an investor, you're connected to our team somehow, you're listening to this, maybe you're a churchgoer, but you've heard Trey's story, and it's radical, it's living by faith. What recommendations would you give to someone listening who wants to start living a life where they're really integrating their faith into their work? Maybe speak to that person, Trey.
Oh, I'll tell you this. I think that I grew up thinking that the more control I could have over something, the better the outcome would be. I am now in my 50s, and I can tell you that that is not the case, right? The more control I can give up to those who are closer to the problem, the better, or who are far above the problem, the better. And it is hard for somebody who likes perfection and excellence and those kinds of things to do that. But one of the greatest gifts that you can do, that to show that you value and recognize and acknowledge and see the people that work with you, is to maybe rethink your control center there, and maybe add a line of code to that regardless of whether you share your faith or whether you have the same faith as the people on your team, those people were actively placed in your care, by a sovereign God, and you should probably check in with that. And that's as preachy as I would ever get. So I have something called the doorknob prayer. Every single morning when I touch the doorknob of my house, I remember to say a quick prayer. And I don't even say the full prayer anymore because God and we've done it enough. But I say, send me who I'm supposed to help today. That's it. And then as people walk into my office, I think, is this the person I'm supposed to help today? And I sort of, I take no time to do this, not even a full second, and just say, is there something I can do for you today? Is there some way I can help you? And sometimes it is a spiritual request that is made and not a monetary one or, any other kind. It is, I'm having a terrible day and this is why that is. That doorknob prayer has helped me integrate faith into life in a way that sort of a lawyer, an MBA type, can make something practical, integrate into workflow, to use language that we're familiar with today. And it has been a beautiful experience for me. I wrote a piece about this on my blog, and I was a little bit not shy to do it, but gosh, is this going to resonate with anybody? And it literally was one of the highest scoring things that I'd ever written on the newsletter before. So,
Wow.
the
Yeah.
doorknob prayer, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go check that out. We'll maybe
Okay.
link to that in the show notes. That'd be great. Any just closing thoughts as we come to an end here? I typically ask the question: if you were to zoom out 5 or 10 years from now, what does success look like for you? You could speak to that, or anything else that's on your heart to close us up.
Yeah, I think in 5 to 10 years, I'm just doing more of the things that I'm doing today where I'm having success. I'm hopefully not doing the things that are, knocking me down and that sort of thing. And my great hope is that I'm doing it in loving relationship with my kids and maybe grandkids by that point. I'm not sure about that, but we'll see as far as that goes. Um, so that's my great hope on it. And I can also share this with you. I have a friend he's a great Christian pastor, but he's a hippie too. And he shared with me one of the sayings that is prevalent in that community. And he says, at the end of the day, we are all just walking each other home. Now, that's the first time I've heard it. Okay. But I think it's a total cliche. And I didn't know about that, but I think it's a total cliche in that community. Like they've heard it their entire lives. But gosh, did it make me feel good? Did it make me feel like, gosh, that is what hands and feet look like? And that's how I want to practice every day. I fail way, way, way more than I achieve in that zone. But one of the things that I've developed is the ability to circle back and say, hey, I was aiming for a higher standard today. I didn't hit it. Accept my apologies and I want to do better in the future. I do that a lot, a lot. And I would rather do that than have someone have to apologize for me in this life or in the one to come.
I think my kids will probably learn more from my mistakes of having to come back and repent than they will the times where I nailed it. So I think you're right on. Man, this has been really good. Thank you for your time. If a listener was hearing stories about an upcoming Kenyan build and they want to learn more about that, where can they learn about that, and where can people learn more about you, Trey?
Yeah, I need to put a project page together and that sort of thing. I'm really getting the feeling that it's coming, and we need to be a part of that. My newsletter is located at plantyourflag.live. Free subscription. I write about anything I want to write about whenever I want to write about it. So when I have something to say, I put something on there, and usually it is me working complex thoughts out. So that's a lot of what I do in that space. And you can always find me at trey-taylor.com. And our family office is threadneedle.co. And I'm on LinkedIn at Trey Taylor JD. So yeah, you can find me any of those places, and always love to be of assistance to those looking for help.
Okay, well, it's been a great show.
Thanks,
Listeners,
Nick.
we've got more great guests, so keep tuning in, and that will end today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the On the Rise podcast. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decisions, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the On the Rise podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.